Motion carries. Now, agenda item number 12, Town Manager's announcements, which is the FY 2018 budget presentation. Turn it over to Mr. St. Angelo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I want to thank the people that are here in the audience for their effort at being here. This is obviously a very important document for the town. Before I start, I need to thank a couple of people. All the town department heads did an excellent job in helping me to put together this budget document, and they deserved a ton of credit, including our business manager from the school system. I do want to recognize a couple of special people, though. We have a financial team made up of the town treasurer, collector, Mindy, and our town assessor, Will, and most of our finance director, who does a tremendous job putting this together, our town accountant, than I think anyone. And this is months worth of work. It seems easy we're doing a presentation tonight, but the reason this presentation is what it is because of months and months of hard work that went into this. So this is the 2000 budget presentation. This is sort of the first step in the public process. What will happen after this is this budget will be broken down by the various subcommittees of the town council, analyzed, and potentially put back together with any potential changes or things that they might recommend before it goes to the citizens. So citizens will have an opportunity to comment at each of these subcommittee meetings, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Most importantly, tonight is great because citizens can look at this right on public access TV and see a very clear, defined budget that they can take a look at. So they're watching with you guys tonight as we do this presentation. So some common goals of what we're trying to do here is in this 2018 budget is responsible fiscal management. It's clear that we need to make sure that we're budgeting appropriately, that we meet all the accounting principles that should be met, and that this is something that taxpayers can see. It's very transparent and open. Control government spending. This is a very difficult budget, and I don't want to say to anybody that this was fun, because this was a very difficult year, and you'll see what some of the major issues are. But government spending is controlled very tightly in this budget. This is the third year in a row that we've asked our departments to take 0% in terms of increased spending within their departments. Now, there is an exception of the union contract and wages, but other than that, most of the departments are at 0. That means no increase for the third year running. Now, there are some exceptions to that. For instance, the school system is an exception to that. Police department has some exceptions, and there's a few other minor adjustments. Meeting the needs of the citizens. It's very difficult to do that when we really don't increase any of the department budgets, but we're trying to keep the departments running effectively with the program and services that they offer today. So there's no real cuts here in terms of programs or services, but it just means that we're squeezing every dollar tighter and tighter. Most of all, this budget does one major thing. It reduces the reliance of the town of Southbridge on landfill royalties. And you're going to see that. We all recognize that this landfill is potentially coming to an end soon, and unless we deal with this immediately, we're going to run into some real long-term problems. I've been telling this town council for a year now that we are going to take the hit this year, and we're going to deal with some of these landfill issues, and now is the time to do it. The vision statement is pretty simple, hasn't changed. Southbridge must be fiscally responsible, have a budget in place that meets the needs of its citizens, and the vision to look strategically at the long-term infrastructure of the community. Goals and objectives of this budget? First of all, the major issue. We're eliminating $920,000 of one-time revenue, landfill royalty, to pay for annual operating expenses. Heard over and over again, this town is dependent on the landfill. We need to get off of that dependency. We need to be in a position where the town of Southbridge decides if this landfill should stay open or closed based on what we think about the landfill, not on the fact that we're held hostage to the money here. This budget, this one that's being presented tonight, eliminates that from our operating budget. This $920 right now is being used to pay police salaries and fire department and government services. If we adopt this budget, that will be out of it. Now, people always ask me, what's the plan to get off of the landfill revenue? This is plan 2. This is the second year of dealing with it. As you recall, this town council was wise enough last year to take us off $850,000 of free cash. Now we can use that free cash to purchase capital items and no longer have to use capital money, money from Casella to do that. So if we adopt this budget with this provision in it, we will be, after 2 years, we will be off of the Casella money by $1,700,000. That's fantastic in 2 years, but this is going to make this a tough budget. Maintain town services with little or no increase. This is what I talked about, all the budgets effectively for the 3rd year in a row essentially got zero with the exception of wages. Prepared to meet the town challenges of the future. Well, what we're doing by controlling our spending really, really tight, we're getting rid of some of these long-term financial obligations with these revenues coming in, which will help us later on, after we get through getting off these revenues, it will make the town more stable and allow us to, in the future, invest more money in building our infrastructure. Provide reasonable funding to our school district that allows them to improve the quality of education to our children and to improve the reputation of our town. Let's face it, this town relies on our school district. In order to make Southbridge better, we have to make our school district better. Everyone knows we're in receivership. We have to provide them the resources to allow that to happen. This is one of the town budgets where you're going to see an increase because we have to do it. Later, though, we're going to talk about a problem, a recent problem that's going to hit us in a huge way, and I want to talk about what that is because the state is making our future more difficult, and we're going to talk about that. Continue a capital improvement program that utilizes free cash in a responsible and appropriate manner. You heard a little bit about the town council talking about the money we're using from free cash. Well, the great thing about using money for free cash for one-time capital purchases, we don't have to borrow money. So you're going to find the town of Southbridge is not borrowing any funds for these capital items, but instead using free cash appropriately to fund our long-term capital program. Today's situation, again, $920,000 of landfill royalties to balance its operating budget. This is a poor financial practice. Everybody knows it, that if it continues, it could result in a long-term harm to our financial stability right here in Southbridge. There's no doubt about this. It's a simple fact. I'm talking a lot about it tonight because we need to deal with it. The utilization of landfill royalties in our operating budget has put us in a situation where we've become dependent on the landfill staying open to fund critical services to the town of Southbridge. That's not what we want. We should make a decision on the landfill based on the merits of expanding it or not because we're desperate and we need the money. That can't go on. We're going to put an end to it. Oh, the landfill, this is, as I said to you, we're going to be, after this year, if we go along with this program, we're going to be off it by $1.7 million. But the town currently uses over $3.8 million of landfill revenues to either fund operating expenses or for special projects. This is an unreliable long-term source of revenue. Of course, we're all wondering if the landfill is going to stay open or close. When the landfill closes, this will have a devastating effect on the town. The revenue source also holds the town hostage to the expansions. So again, you take that 3.8, you reduce it by $1.7 million if we go forward, and we're about halfway there. Now, I do want to caution, there's some revenues here that are outside of the $3.8 million, and that's the trash pickup we have. Now, we won't lose trash pickup for like another 10 years, but at some point in time in the future, we're going to have to deal with that benefit, because right now, it's budgeted about $350,000. If we had to replace it right now, it's probably closer to $700,000 or $800,000. So that's a future problem, but the good thing is we have time to deal with it because it's 10 years down the road, okay? Now, this is some good news. This is the state budget, okay? So the first thing what we get is we get a sheet of all the state revenues. It's called a cherry sheet revenue. And the revenue we're getting is an increase from last year is about $1,438,590. So that's the total increase of state funds to the town of Southbridge. Great news. Now, what is that made up of? Chapter 70, which is our main education formula, is up about $690,000 over last year. So that's money that the state is essentially designed to go to our education system, so that's very positive news. Unrestricted general fund money, we're getting about $131,000. This charter school, I'm going to come back to this issue later, but this is the problem of the future that's sort of hanging over our heads as of just a week or so ago. And I don't want to talk about it yet, but I'm going to get down into this issue in a lot more detail in a future slide. This is a problem. Minor revenues, we also get about $16,000 in minor revenues from the state. So now that's the state revenue number coming into the town, and for the most part, it's pretty good news. So now we're looking at a total revenue projection of all the different revenues we come in, and I know there's a lot of information up there, but I want to highlight a few lines. Again, if you go down to about the fourth line or so down, you'll see Cherry Street receipts. That's the governor's proposal, and again, this could change. Hopefully the legislature gives us more money, but we wouldn't count on it. But that's that $1,438,590 I talked about. And I told you a little bit about what that's for. Now there's a line that says free cash right under those Cherry Street receipts, and you'll note that that says zero now. That number used to be $850,000 in past budgets. So that was our last year solution. We got that out of our budget. That's great news, and the town council deserves a lot of appreciation for that. Down another two lines is something called local receipts. This is all the local money we usually get. Things like your motor vehicle taxes. This is the area where the landfill royalties money came into. You'll see that that account as a total went down by $397,448. That's the total. You'll see those items underneath that are highlighted: motor vehicle excise, landfill royalty, landfill reimbursement, other local receipts. Other local receipts, that's really the motor vehicle tax and those. That went up by $460,119. But when you take the $920,000 of landfill royalties out and the other minor adjustments, that's what adjusts down to the negative $397,448. You get it? The increased the landfill monies we're taking out of the budget, yes, we got some local receipts went up, but we lost all the local receipts we had and then some trying to deal with this landfill issue. So that highlights the major revenues for the town. And what we have to do is Karen and I go through every single revenue item that's coming to the town. And we analyze those specific accounts, and we look at what happened last year and the year before and see what we can expect as a revenue number this year. We want to be responsible when we look at those revenue numbers because we want to make sure that we don't over budget revenues or under budget revenues. If you under budget revenues too much, you might end up with extra free cash. But we want to be conservative because we'd rather be slightly under than slightly over, okay? Now, okay, this is the expense section. I'm going to highlight a couple of issues in the expense section here as well. You'll see about the third line down, it says state and county Cherry Street changes. And you'll see it's $755,676. That's new expenses. That's the charter school issue that I talked earlier about it. If you go down two more lines, you'll see charter school assessment, $800,000. That's a new expense to the town of Southbridge. Quote, new expense. We've never had it before, $800,000, and we're going to talk some more about that particular line. If we go down to the category it says insurances, is about halfway down the page, you'll see the different kinds of insurance plans the town has. Group health and life, property and casualty, workers' comp, unemployment. Those are all kind of things that are out of town control. They're really just bills. This is what your insurance rates are going to be. This is what you have to pay if you want to have insurance. So you'll see that the net increase in insurance numbers is $427,757. That's a 10.6% cost increase that the town has no control over. If you want to have insurance, that's what you have to pay. That's our part of it. And employees, of course, they pay their share. And unlike a lot of towns, there's a 60-40 split. The town pays 60, employees pay 40. I'll note that that's low compared to other towns. Many towns have 70-30, or some towns have 80-20. Southbridge pays less in terms of paying for these insurances than a lot of other towns do. Then you go down after insurances, you look at retirement. Well, that's the cost we have to pay for employees who retire. And as everyone, I think, knows, for years, town governments in all towns across the state underfunded their retirement accounts. So we're paying our normal expenses for the year, plus we're paying off some unfunded liability from many, many years ago, and that account went up by 5.91%, or $181,197. Good news, some of our debt, money that we owe, has fallen off, and our debt service went down by $124,253. So that's pretty good news that our debt has gone down. You'll see the last item, expenses, Southbridge Public Schools. I told you there's one department where it went up over the normal employee cost. We are attempting in this budget to give the school system 2.5%. The school system, I want to say right now, has been great with us. They have a lot of plans to fix this district. They're moving forward in, I think, a phenomenal way. And in order for them to improve the district and bring it back to where we can be very proud of it and the citizens can be proud, it takes resources. And we have sacrificed a lot of our other departments in terms of increasing their ability to run program and services in order to take that money and give it to our school system. But obviously a goal of mine and a priority of this town needs to put money resources where they can do the most benefit, and frankly we believe that that's in our school system, and to turn that around. We have great talent over there. I'm happy about I believe in the people who are running the district, so I'm more likely to give them this money than I would be if I wasn't comfortable with the leadership. But the leadership has proven they're willing to make the tough decisions, and they'll spend the money in a wise manner. So that's why we are confident in giving them that funding. You will see when you get the budget that the school system has worked very hard to get this budget down to 2.5%. It was a lot higher when they first started, but in trying to work with us, they brought their budget significantly down to where it's a 2.5% increase. Now, school funding, you talk about school funding in terms of how much money we give directly in terms of the school budget, a 2.5% increase, but we fund here in the town more than just the direct line item for their operating budget. So first you're going to see their operating budget, what we talk about, a $653,000 increase, or 2.5%. The school choice assessment, now everyone recognizes that Southbridge is part of a regional school choice process. Here you're going to see that the school choice students have slightly gone down. And we're going to again talk about that a little bit later, but a minor adjustment to the school choice numbers. Charter school, this is where I want to talk about the issue that is now coming up to us. In the town of Sturbridge, a new charter school has opened. And that charter school is attracting students from all around the region, but it's particularly attracting students from Southbridge. And I'm going to talk about how many students from Southbridge are leaving our regional school district or our school district to go to this charter school. That $800,000 is money that's coming out of our town budget and now has to go to a charter school in Sturbridge by state law. We have no control. So in addition to the money we have to fund for our normal education system, while we're doing that, the state expects us to send $800,000 of money to the town of I want to say the town of Sturbridge, but a charter school in Sturbridge, and we're going to get more detailed about that. Additional school funding in the town budget, other expenses I'm going to get into more in depth, but 8.89% or another $275,000 in funding to education. So the new funding total that's going to go to all of our school services, and again, that's not just our school district itself, but it also includes the charter school and the school assessment, the choice and all the other issues. The total cost of the town is $1,670,703,000. Again, you got to remember we got a bunch of extra money from the state, so the state is picking up the lion's share of this cost. Now, the charter school is called the Old Sturbridge Academy, and I'm not here tonight to say anything negative about the charter school. There's all kinds of pros to charter schools. But the state knows that the town of Southbridge is struggling to rebuild our system, and they have a receiver in here who I think is doing a great job. Their finance manager is here. But here's what's going on. In our kindergarten classes, we're losing 12 students to the charter school. In our first grade class, we're losing 15 students to the charter school. Second grade, 18 students. Third grade, 17 students. A total of 62 students might leave our school district and go to the charter school, and they're going to take $800,000 with them. Okay? Now, in truth, this year, the state is going to provide a 75% reimbursement on that money. So the good news is that in this year, fiscal year 18, it's going to have a $200,000 impact to this fiscal year's budget. I want everybody to understand that well, because we're dealing with the $920 from the Casella money, now another $200,000 on top of that was unexpected and not part of our normal budget. That's a huge hit to the Southbridge town budget, right? Okay, just because it's clear, because we're going to talk more about that. Major concern, and I want you to hear this very clearly, fiscal year 19, the state reimbursement rate falls to 25% and the amount of students may increase. It's my understanding that the charter school is not going to be just K through 3, but it's going to be K through 8, or I think it's K through 6 or K through 8, whatever. But we could lose more students to the charter school next year. So instead of it being $800,000, it could be $1 million, and the reimbursement's not going to be 75%, it's only going to be 25%. So that tells you what the problem is for fiscal year 19. Needless to say, when I saw this happening, I raised some concerns at the state level. I asked for the State Commissioner of Education to meet with me. I expressed in very strong terms my concern with this. We did end up having a phone conference with state officials, the Assistant State Education Commissioner, a number of his charter school people, and I explained this problem clearly to them, that this is a huge hit to the town, and I can't do both. I cannot fund, or we cannot fund, our school system appropriately like they would like us to do, and at the same time take $800,000 or more and send it out of district. I just don't know how to do that. We don't have the financial ability to do that. So they're setting up a situation where not this year's budget we're working on for next year, but the year after, we're going to have to make a difficult choice. Do we not give money to our school district because we have to send the money out to our charter school? The state keeps saying to me, and I'll say it, the conference call with state officials, state comments, we need to make sure the districts are successful. We will work with you to ensure that the town can deal with this funding issue. If not, the town will have to consider reducing funding to our local school district. The town simply will not have the funds to send this much money to the charter school and at the same time provide necessary increases to our schools. Heard a lot of great things in that conference call from state officials. They told me that they're partners with the town of Southbridge. They're going to work with us. They understand this issue. That their success is our success because they're running the school district. It was wonderful. They said great things. But the bottom line is they didn't offer me another dime. Okay, so I love great things. I expressed in a follow-up meeting after that call to the commissioner that I was very pleased he let me talk to his staff, and it was a great meeting, and they promised me that they would work around this and they would deal with this. But at the end of the day, I got no money. And at the end of the day, that's what I said, we need to work on this. I don't want to wait till next year for this problem. I need the state to come in and work with us to try to solve this before it becomes a fiscal year 19 disaster, because that's what I say. I'm here, to be honest with you, and I know you're here to rebuild the school system and to invest in it and make sure it's great and the children have a quality education. You can't tie our hands behind our back and try to make us do this. It's just impossible. So if the school system in the 19 budget doesn't have resources, we can't put the kind of resources we believe they should have. It's going to be the responsibility of the state. I don't think, my personal opinion, is they should have opened a charter school right next door to attract a bunch of our students out of it. I think that was not the best decision. I understand it's state law, and I understand charter schools are great in their own way, but that is having a significant impact on our town, and I'm not happy about it. Now, analysis of the education budget on the town side of the budget. Again, this is one of those additional expenses. I talked a little bit about this earlier, and it kind of just breaks down health insurance. You're going to see here a 12.05% increase in a health insurance cost. Workers' compensation went up by 14%. Property and liability, a small amount went down by 6.4%. Pension went up by 5.6%, and the total is about an 8.89% increase. So yes, the school budget went up by 2.5%. We gave money away to the charter school, but also these other costs that are education related went up by over 8%. So you can see the school system has a big impact on this full town budget. Now we're going to go into the town operating budget. Now I'm going to only pull out a couple of quick issues here, and we're going to get into some of these in a lot more detail in the subcommittees. But election went down by 40.87%. Simple answer is there's not as many elections this year as there have been in the past. The planning department budget, and we're going to talk about that in the next slides, went up significantly. It went up, it says 204%, but it's a little over $45,000, and I want to explain what that is. In my opinion, that's going to eventually end up saving the town money in the long haul. But essentially what we're going to be talking about in the next slides is the town has a part-time town planner. I don't know any towns the size of Southbridge that has a part-time town planner. It's completely illogical. It doesn't make sense. It hurts us in our land use issues. I think it costs us more money than it saves by being a little bit tight here. I know that the town council has routinely talked about this issue, and we're going to try to fix it and correct it going forward. Again, I think over the long term, it's going to be a significant savings. The inspections department, 10.82% increase. And I want to explain that kind of simple. We have 3 or 4 inspectors, a plumbing inspector, electrical inspectors. These are people who go out and inspect buildings to make sure they're safe and they're approved for when they're built, or even buildings that are being renovated or whatever is going on. We have been paying them a salary that is just ridiculously low. They are so underpaid. I'm shocked that they're still here. They obviously are complaining they're not much above minimum wage. I don't know what you people pay a plumber or electrician when they come to your house, but it's nothing looking like minimum wage or even low like that. This salary, we're going to talk about this in the subcommittee, but if we don't pay them a reasonable salary, I'm afraid we're going to lose them. And then the cost of rehiring those people will be more than what I'm offering in this presentation. But it's an issue that they've made it clear we're going to deal with it this year in some reasonable way. They deserve a salary that's marketplace salary, and we can't underpay them forever. Frankly, I'm surprised that they've lasted this long. But if you look at the total, now this is all of our town budgets. If you look at the total percentage increase in our total town budgets, it's 1.54% increase in every other town to budget when you look at the totals, right? That's very low. That includes, really the big issue there is wages and adjustments in salaries. That's really all it is. There's some other minor adjustments, but it's really all revolves around labor costs that are, most of which is union bargain. So unions across the state are all getting at least 2%. Our unions got 2% in their budget negotiations that was approved by town council, pretty consistent with the statewide issues. So you see our town departments are not spending a lot of excess money here. They're spending what they need to essentially survive. And again, in future years, we just can't keep giving them zero. You can only go with zero increases so long before we just set back the quality of services that are being provided. Talked earlier about the issue of a full-time town planner. And this is, in my opinion, a critical issue. And again, I know the town council had felt strongly about this issue as well. Right now, we have a part-time town planner. The position is budgeted at $21,725. That's 36 hours every 2 weeks, so a little over 15, more like 17 and a half hours every week. I came from the town of Hanson. We had 9,000 people. We had no businesses in town, and we had a full-time planner. All other, even small towns have full-time town planners, because if you screw up, no other simple way to say this, if you screw up your land use and what you're doing in land use, it costs the town a lot of money, because that's our tax base. What we do in terms of developing our land is really how we generate revenues for the town. And frankly, it keeps us from building where we're not supposed to be building. It makes sure that we're building appropriately. It makes sure we have plans for things like the industrial park. There's a whole list of things that a town planner does. But they play so many different roles in terms of how we use our land, looking at state lands, developing things like master plans and zoning regulations. One of the things we're looking at now is updating our zoning maps. This should have been done years ago, and a town planner would have led the effort. It's just a critical function in town government, and I'm asking town council to consider this one position, making it full-time moving forward. Now, how could the town have benefited in the past and going forward with having a full-time planner? Well, I'll say this. I think we all have heard of the Hunters Ridge subdivision, and we've heard about it, frankly, way too much. Had we done some things, I think we'd be in a much better situation. I'm not going to get into the details of which, but there's a lot of subdivisions in the town where we're planning roads and making sure that roads are appropriate. We need to make sure our planning is top-notch quality, and we do such as that we avoid future lawsuits, and we make sure the subdivision and the residents that live in the subdivision are properly protected. That's one of the areas I think we could do a much better job. And I think they, for the most part in Hunters Ridge, they made some very good decisions. But it kind of sets an example, or shows an example of how we can improve. Also, we can basically use this, a town planner, to keep up with current legislation. Again, make sure our zoning maps are better, make sure all departments are working better, making sure that when a new company might consider coming to town, or when a company wants to expand, that they review the plans, that they make sense, they make sure we don't have any long-term land use problems. They're involved with working with Heather and a whole host of different issues, even with the sewer work that she might do. So it's something I think is a critical business that we need to be in. So looking here at the cost difference between the current status and a full-time planner is $46,241. We spent a great deal of time in Rosemary in particular trying to look at what other towns are paying their town planners. And we actually work with CMRPC, which is a regional planning agency, to look at what the customary salaries for town planning is. So you'll see the range from CMRPC was between $62,000 and $69,000. Now, we're trying to attract somebody quality. I'm not looking to attract the bottom of the list. We need to attract somebody that's a decent quality to be able to help Southbridge long into the future in developing the land in a proper way. Now, the next section is some increases of expenses that are beyond our control. I talked a little bit about that, and I'm going to just quickly go through some of these items because there's nothing I can do to cut them. They are what they are. And again, group health and life insurance going up by 12%, property and casualty is going down by 5.85%, workers' comp up by 11.87%, retirement going up by 5.91%, and debt, the good news is that debt is actually going down by 4.37%. The next slide is the slide that you've all been waiting for, I guess. This is the slide, it always is the slide that impacts people. And people can see it, and this is the difficult decision. This budget was not fun for anyone to put together because it was difficult dealing with those major problems that we have to do, getting off the landfill money, dealing with the new charter school. You'll see here the fiscal year 18 projected tax levy, that this budget is $20,188,508. The proposed tax levy we're putting in to meet the needs of this town is $19,194,079. That makes a gross increase in the tax levy is $994,429, or 5.18%. Now, what the good news is that new growth is expected to be at $234,000. So the increase in expenses here goes to $760,429, or a 3.96 tax increase. Now, normally I would say that's 3.96, a little higher than where I'd like to be. But in dealing with the Casella issue and the school problems we have, frankly, there's been a tremendous amount of work in keeping this number down to where it is. It could be a lot higher. I'm seeing towns well above this that are making proposals well above this, and they don't have the kind of long-term problems that we have to fix. So if you want to get off the Casella money, if you want to make our school system come back and improve it, this is where it's at. I don't think there's a lot we can cut from here. Sure, we can reduce the school budget and go under 2.5%. The question is, do we really want to do it? The 920, I think, is we just need to do it. There's kind of no option with it. Again, I want people to understand that this is with a budget that is as tight as it possibly can be, and it builds us slowly but surely off of the dependence on the Casella money in the landfill. Future next steps: continue to reduce our reliance on landfill revenues. If the town moves forward to reduce this, reduce to $920,000 from the landfill, royalties in this year's operating budget will have taken a great step forward in reducing our reliance on the landfill. While we have a significant work to do, each year the town's financial picture will improve dramatically. This is the hardest year as it relates to the landfill. If we get through this year and we do this, future years won't be as bad because we won't have to tackle a $920,000 item in one budget year. We can spread out that money, whatever additional money from Casella, we can spread it out over a much longer term. So this is where we bite the bullet. This is where we make the biggest part of the deal. If we can do this, we're setting the town's future up in a much, much stronger position. Once the town is no longer dependent on landfill revenues, we can then be in a better position to determine if the landfill should stay open and be permanently closed. Again, you can make it on a lot of other reasons than being dependent on the money. Free cash free cash, as I said before, it's being utilized on the right stuff now. The capital improvement budget that you guys are going to be looking at and dealing with, we actually dealt with some of it tonight, is going to be used for capital items, and we don't have to borrow anymore. That's tremendous, not making long-term increase to debt and having to pay the interest costs on the debt. Also, keeping debt down makes our bond rating stay level, or actually, hopefully, potentially over time, can improve our bond rating, and that means if we do have to borrow in the future, we can do so at a lower rate. Also, I want to point out that if Casella for some reason stays open, then that money becomes more free cash. So if we still get that money in for revenue, and it's no longer part of our operating budget, it becomes a free cash item. Maybe then we could tackle the issue of roads we keep talking about here in town. If we had an extra $1 million of Casella money and we don't have to use it for our operating budget, until such time as the landfill closes, we might be able to use that money to actually fix some of our infrastructure and use it for road money, at least until the time until that money disappears, right? But at least then we'll be able to tackle that issue. That's the presentation tonight. I know we have a long way to go. I look forward to working with all of the members in the various subcommittees to analyze these, the various parts of this budget and continue to move the town forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager.